The great hall of the alien palace shimmered with silver walls and crystal lights. Tall figures from many star systems gathered there, dressed in robes that carried the symbols of their noble houses. All eyes turned toward the throne where the alien queen sat, her crown glowing faintly under the light. She was proud, graceful, and known across the galaxy as a ruler of wisdom and strength. Her empire stretched across many worlds, and her word alone could change the fate of entire planets. Yet on this day, her empire whispered with disbelief, for she had chosen a husband not from the strongest warrior race, nor from the richest house, but from Earth. She had chosen a human. The human stood beside her throne, wearing a simple ceremonial uniform, nothing grand compared to the robes and armor around him. His name was Daniel, and he looked small in the company of tall alien lords whose scales, wings, or glowing skin seemed to mark them as far above ordinary men. His dark hair, calm eyes, and steady posture did not shine like jewels, but there was something unshaken about him. He bowed his head slightly when the crowd stared, not with shame, but with quiet respect. The queen raised her hand, and the room silenced. Her voice was strong, carrying across the hall. Today, I unite my future with one who comes from a world many here believe to be small and weak. But strength does not always lie in height, nor in power of arms. I have chosen Daniel of Earth as my partner, not because of his world's armies, but because of the strength he carries within his heart. The council members exchanged doubtful glances. Some tried to hide their smirks. To them, humans were fragile, short-lived, and untested in the great struggles of the galaxy. The Queen's closest generals wondered if this decision would invite mockery from rival empires. The nobles whispered softly, their words sharp. "Why him?" a scaled noble muttered. "Surely a mistake," another answered. "Humans are not ready for such honor," someone else said. Daniel heard the whispers, but he did not react. He kept his posture firm, his expression calm. He did not try to challenge the voices nor demand their respect. He simply stood at the Queen's side, showing he was unafraid to be judged. Later, as the hall emptied and the voices of doubt faded, the Queen and Daniel walked together through the palace corridors. She studied him with curious eyes. "Do you hear their words, Daniel? They believe you unworthy." "I hear them," he answered softly. His voice was not loud, but it carried a steady note. "But their words do not change who I am. I did not come here to prove myself to them. I came because you asked me to stand with you." The Queen paused. She was used to proud warriors and ambitious nobles who fought for her attention, each trying to prove their worth through victories and wealth. Daniel was different. He showed no desire to boast, no need to defend his pride. Instead, he simply offered his loyalty, quiet but strong. "You are strange, human," she said. Her voice was neither harsh nor kind, but thoughtful. "Most would shout back at those who insult them. Yet you stay calm." Daniel gave a faint smile. "On Earth, we learn that storms will always come. Shouting at the storm does not stop the rain. You stand through it, and wait for the sun." His words lingered in her mind as they reached the royal chambers. She sat down, setting aside her crown. For the first time that day, the Queen allowed herself to relax. Daniel did not speak more, but his silence was not heavy. It felt steady, like the ground beneath her feet. The Queen looked at him again, studying the man she had chosen. He was not tall, not glowing, not surrounded by the aura of alien power. Yet there was something different about him. His patience, his humility, and his quiet strength pulled at her thoughts. Outside, the city hummed with alien life. Ships crossed the sky, towers stretched above the clouds, and the voices of her people rose in song and doubt. The empire believed their queen had married weakness. But in her heart, she wondered if perhaps she had chosen something greater than power. That night, as stars filled the sky above the palace, the queen rested her gaze on Daniel one last time before sleep. She did not yet know the depths of his strength, but already she felt a change. He was no ordinary human. And though the galaxy doubted him, she began to wonder if they would one day see what she saw. Days passed since the grand ceremony, but the whispers in the palace did not fade. Many nobles still looked at Daniel with doubt, and even some of the queen's generals showed little respect when he walked by. To them, he was just a man from a small world, chosen for reasons they could not understand. Yet the queen stood by her choice, and Daniel stayed at her side without complaint. In the early mornings, when the palace was quiet, Daniel often walked in the gardens that stretched across floating platforms above the city. Strange flowers from distant worlds glowed softly, and silver birds glided through the air. The queen sometimes found him there, studying the plants with interest. One morning, she approached him. "You spend much time here," she said. Daniel turned and smiled. "On Earth, I grew up near forests. The garden reminds me of home. It is quiet here, away from the noise of the court." The queen tilted her head. "Most who live in this palace seek attention. Yet you seek silence. Why?" He answered with calm honesty. "Because in silence, you can hear what matters. Noise makes people blind to the truth." She thought about his words as they walked together through the garden. Unlike others who always tried to impress her with grand speeches, Daniel spoke simply. His words did not sparkle like jewels, yet they stayed in her heart. Later that week, the queen invited him to join a council meeting. The generals stood around a great table of glass, showing maps of distant systems where border tensions grew. Alien voices argued, each suggesting bold moves, each trying to show their cleverness. Daniel sat quietly, listening. When the queen finally asked for his opinion, he hesitated before speaking. "I am not a general," he said, "but I see something you may have overlooked. Your enemies are not strong in numbers, but they move quickly. If you slow them down instead of chasing them, they will lose their advantage." The room grew silent. One general frowned. "A human gives us lessons in war." But the queen raised her hand. "Let him finish." Daniel leaned forward. "On Earth, when a hunter chases prey too fast, the hunter grows tired, and the prey escapes. But if the hunter sets traps and forces the prey to move where he wishes, the prey is caught without waste." The queen saw the sense in his words. It was a simple idea, but none of her proud generals had thought of it. Though many in the room dismissed him, she stored his advice in her mind. That night, when she considered her strategies, she found herself returning to his suggestion again and again. Outside the council, the queen noticed other small things about him. When servants dropped objects, Daniel was the first to help them pick it up, even when nobles walked by without care. When children of the palace guards played in the courtyard, Daniel would stop to speak with them, smiling at their simple questions. He did not treat the lowest as less important, and this made the queen pause. In her world of power and rank, such kindness was rare. One evening, as the sun set over the city's tall towers, the queen and Daniel stood together on the balcony of her chamber. The sky was painted gold and red, and ships moved like tiny stars above the horizon. "Do you miss your world?" she asked softly. Daniel's eyes stayed on the sky. "Yes, I miss it. But I do not regret being here." Home is not only a place. Sometimes home is the people you choose to stand with. The queen felt his words touch her deeply. She had many allies, many soldiers, but very few who truly stood with her as more than subjects. Daniel's presence was becoming something different, something she had not expected. Still, doubt remained in her mind. She respected his calm spirit and his clever ideas, but she wondered if such traits could truly protect her empire. Her people believed strength was shown in battle, in power, in fear. Could a human, so ordinary on the surface, ever match such expectations? As stars filled the night sky, the queen looked at Daniel standing quietly at her side. His calm presence gave her peace, but in her heart, questions remained. She did not yet know that storms were already rising beyond her borders, storms that would soon test both her and the human she had chosen. For now, though, she allowed herself to feel a sense of calm. She did not admit it aloud, but she was beginning to see Daniel not only as her husband by duty, but as someone whose hidden bond was slowly touching her soul. The palace stood high above the city, shining with lights that touched the sky. To outsiders, it looked peaceful, but inside the walls, unrest was growing. The queen's decision to marry a human had stirred anger among certain nobles. They whispered in dark halls and exchanged secret signals in hidden chambers. To them, the queen's choice was a sign of weakness, and weakness could not rule an empire. Daniel sensed the tension, though no one spoke openly to him. Guards avoided his eyes, and courtiers lowered their voices when he passed. The queen remained strong in public, but in private, her eyes showed the weight of the burden she carried. One evening, as she walked through the palace gardens with Daniel, she finally spoke her thoughts. "There are those who believe I have betrayed the strength of our empire. They will not rest quietly." Daniel looked at her with steady eyes. On earth, when a tree grows tall, winds always rise against it. The higher the tree, the stronger the winds. You are that tree, and you must stand. But if storms come, I will stand with you. The queen studied him, uncertain if his calm words were enough to face the danger that threatened them. Still, there was comfort in knowing he did not fear standing beside her. That night, as the palace slept, shadows moved silently through its corridors. A group of masked figures slipped past guards with skill, their weapons hidden beneath dark cloaks. They had one goal, the throne. The queen was in her private chamber, reading messages from distant planets, when the door burst open. Figures rushed inside with blades of strange metal that glowed faintly. Her guards fell quickly, caught by surprise. The queen reached for her staff, ready to fight, but before she could rise fully, Daniel stepped forward. He had no weapon, no armor, only his own strength. The assassins laughed at him, thinking him no more than a fragile human. But Daniel did not hesitate. He moved fast, blocking the first strike with his arm and driving his shoulder into the attacker's chest. The assassin stumbled back in shock. Another swung at him, and Daniel caught the blade with both hands. Pain burned as it cut into his skin, but he held on, twisting until the weapon fell free. He struck with his fist, knocking the assassin to the ground. His movements were not elegant like trained soldiers, but they were fierce, born from pure will to protect. The queen watched in astonishment. She had expected him to fall quickly, but instead, he stood like a wall, refusing to step back even as blood marked his arms. She raised her staff and joined the fight, striking down one of the masked figures. Together, they pushed the assassins back. Finally, the palace guards arrived, answering the alarm. The rebels, realizing their mission had failed, fled into the night, leaving their wounded behind. Silence filled the chamber once more, broken only by Daniel's heavy breathing. The queen rushed to him. "You are hurt." He shook his head, though his hands still bled. "I am alive. That is enough." Her eyes softened. "You faced death without fear. Why did you not protect yourself first?" Daniel looked at her with quiet certainty. "Because your life means more than mine. If you fall, your people fall. If I fall, the world still stands. My choice was simple." The queen's heart trembled at his words. She had seen warriors who fought for glory, soldiers who fought for orders, but rarely one who fought only to protect. His courage was raw and unshaped, yet it burned brighter than the weapons that had tried to end them. The next day, the palace buzzed with stories. Servants spoke of how the human consort had stood against assassins and survived. Guards whispered of his bravery, and even doubtful nobles began to look at him differently. The whispers of weakness started to fade, replaced by cautious respect. That evening, the queen stood with Daniel on the same balcony where they had spoken before. The city stretched below, lights glowing like stars. She turned to him and said, "You have shown me a strength I did not expect. Not the strength of muscle alone, but the strength to face fear without breaking." Daniel smiled faintly, his hand bandaged. "I am only human. But perhaps sometimes that is enough." The queen said nothing for a moment. She only looked at him, wondering how someone so simple in appearance could hold such quiet power. Deep in her heart, she began to realize that the man she had chosen was not a weakness, but perhaps the greatest strength she could ever have. The days after the attack brought no peace. The queen's spies returned with troubling news. A rival empire was gathering ships at the border, their leaders certain that her marriage to a human had weakened her rule. The rebellion inside the palace had failed, but greater storms now loomed beyond the stars. In the Grand Council chamber, the queen sat before her generals. Maps of star systems glowed on the table, red marks showing enemy fleets. The generals argued loudly, each offering bold but reckless strategies. Some demanded a direct strike, others wanted to retreat and fortify. The queen listened, but her heart grew heavy. None of their plans gave her confidence. She glanced at Daniel, who sat quietly at her side, watching the discussion. His presence calmed her, even in the heated room. Finally, she turned to him. "What do you think, Daniel? You have no rank here, but you have faced danger with me. Speak freely." The generals looked shocked. A few frowned, whispering that the queen had lost faith in her own commanders. But Daniel did not flinch at their eyes. He studied the glowing map carefully. "Your enemies know your strength," he said slowly. "They know your fleets are powerful, so they will not fight you directly. They will try to strike fast, in many places at once, hoping to stretch your armies thin. If you chase them, they will draw you into a trap. Instead, you must turn their speed against them." One general laughed. "And how will a human teach us war?" But Daniel continued calmly. "Divide them. Force them to fight where you are strongest, not where they are strongest. On earth, when we face a flood, we do not chase the water. We guide it into channels and let it weaken itself." The queen leaned forward. "And how do you suggest we guide this flood?" Daniel pointed to a cluster of border systems. "Here. Leave these worlds lightly defended. Make the enemy believe they are easy to take. But hide your strength nearby, waiting. When they come, they will be caught between your true forces. They will be trapped in the channel you built. The chamber fell silent. The plan was simple, yet none of the proud generals had thought of it. The queen's eyes shone with interest. "It is dangerous," she said, "but it could work." Some generals muttered, still doubtful. But the queen made her choice. "We will try it. And Daniel will lead the first strike." Gasps filled the room. "A human? He has no training," one general protested. The queen's voice turned firm. "He has earned his place. He will command." Daniel did not ask for the role, but when he looked at the queen, he saw trust in her eyes. He gave a quiet nod. "I will do my best." A week later, Daniel stood on the deck of a starship, wearing simple armor. Alien soldiers filled the halls around him, their tall frames and sharp eyes full of doubt. Many had fought for years in the Queen's armies, and now they were ordered to follow a human who had never led a fleet. When Daniel addressed them, his words were plain, without the pride of generals. "I know you do not trust me," he said. "I know you think I am weak. But I will not ask you to follow me because of who I am. Follow me because I will stand with you in the fight. I will not stay behind while you risk your lives. I will be there, at the front, until the end." His voice was steady, and though simple, it carried a weight that touched the soldiers. Slowly, doubt turned to quiet respect. When the enemy arrived, Daniel's plan unfolded. The rival fleet moved quickly, striking at the worlds that seemed weak. But hidden ships of the Queen's empire rose from the shadows, cutting off their escape. Daniel led his soldiers in the first counterattack. He did not stay behind as a commander. He was on the ground with them, moving through fire and dust, lifting the wounded, and guiding the lost. His courage was not in great strength of body, but in never stepping back even when danger grew. By the end of the battle, the enemy was forced to retreat, leaving wreckage scattered across the sky. The soldiers who had once doubted him now looked at him with respect. They whispered that perhaps the human was not weak after all. Back in the palace, the Queen received the reports. Victory had been won, not by overwhelming force, but by a clever trap and the courage of a man the galaxy had mocked. She stood on her balcony that night, the stars shining above, and when Daniel returned to her side, she looked at him with new eyes. "You were right," she said softly. "Sometimes strength is not in the largest army, but in the smallest spark that guides it." Daniel only smiled, tired but calm. Sometimes, all a spark needs is a chance to light the fire. The victory at the border gave the Queen's empire new hope, but it also drew greater anger from their enemies. The rival empire, humiliated by their defeat, gathered even larger fleets. Soon the war spread across many systems, and the Queen's soldiers were forced into battle after battle. Daniel, though still new to command, became a name whispered across the camps. Soldiers who once doubted him now spoke of the human who stood in the fire with them, who carried the wounded on his back, who refused to leave anyone behind. His courage spread like a quiet flame, and that flame gave strength to those around him. One evening, before a great battle, Daniel stood before his soldiers. Alien eyes, some glowing, some sharp like blades, watched him closely. He did not wear shining armor like the generals, only simple gear worn from long marches. "I cannot promise you this fight will be easy," he said. His voice was steady, not loud but clear. "Our enemy believes we are weaker, but we will not give them victory. We do not fight only for land or for power. We fight for each other. If you fall, I will be there. If I fall, I trust you will carry on. That is how we win, not with fear, but with trust." The soldiers stood taller, their doubt fading into a strange pride. They had followed many commanders before, but few spoke as Daniel did, not as a ruler above them, but as one of them. When the battle began, the enemy came with overwhelming numbers. Their ships darkened the skies, their weapons thundered like storms. The Queen's forces struggled, pushed back again and again. Amid the chaos, Daniel led from the front, his voice carrying over the noise. "Hold the line. Do not break." When soldiers fell, he lifted them. When enemy fire burned the ground, he pushed forward, guiding his troops through cover. His body ached, his arms grew heavy, but he never slowed. The Queen watched from her command post, her heart tight with worry. She had never seen a human fight like this. He was not the strongest or the fastest, yet he refused to yield. At the height of the battle, the enemy launched a strike directly at the Queen's position. Her guards fought bravely but were outnumbered. For a moment, it seemed the enemy would capture her. But Daniel saw the danger. Without waiting, he broke through the lines with a handful of soldiers, racing toward her. He reached her side just as the enemy closed in. His armor was broken, his arms bloodied, but his eyes held fire. He stood before her like a shield, facing the enemy with nothing but will. "You will not touch her," he said, his voice like stone. The enemy charged, but Daniel and his small group fought with desperate strength. Every step they held gave the Queen time to rally her guards. Soon the tide shifted, and reinforcements arrived, pushing the enemy back. The Queen was safe, and Daniel still stood, though his body shook from exhaustion. After the battle, the soldiers cheered not for their victory alone, but for the man who had risked everything to protect their Queen. Around the campfires that night, they spoke of the human whose courage burned brighter than the enemy's weapons. The Queen visited Daniel in the medical hall. He was sitting quietly, his wounds being treated, yet he greeted her with the same calm smile he always carried. "You saved me," she said softly. Daniel shook his head. "I only did what anyone should do." "Not anyone," she replied. Her voice was firm but gentle. "Many would think first of themselves. You thought only of me, and of them." She nodded toward the soldiers resting nearby. He lowered his eyes. "I am not the strongest, my Queen. I am only human. But maybe strength is not always in power. Maybe it is in standing when others cannot." The Queen's gaze lingered on him. She saw not just a man from a small world, but a flame that could light even the darkest night. In that moment, she understood why her heart had chosen him, even when her empire doubted. The war was not over. Greater battles still waited beyond the stars. But now, her people no longer whispered of weakness. They spoke of courage, of unity, and of the human who had shown them that true strength was not always found in muscle or machines, but in the will to protect, to endure, and to never give up. The war had stretched across many months. Victories and losses marked both sides, but now the final battle approached. The rival empire gathered its largest fleet, enough to crush the Queen's forces in one strike. The skies above the border world of Thalera filled with enemy ships, dark shapes that blocked the stars. In the palace war chamber, tension filled the air. Generals studied maps, their voices sharp with fear and urgency. Even the bravest commanders admitted the truth: the enemy's strength was overwhelming. The Queen listened but kept her eyes calm, though inside her heart was heavy. If they lost here, her empire would fall. She turned to Daniel, who stood at her side as always. "What do you see?" she asked quietly. Daniel looked at the map, his brow furrowed. I see numbers against us. I see fear in this room. But I also see a chance. The generals shook their heads. A chance? We are outmatched 10-1. There is no chance. But Daniel's voice was steady. On Earth, when a great storm comes, we cannot stop it. But we can bend, we can endure, and when the storm passes, we rise again. Your enemy believes strength is in numbers and power. They do not understand the strength of endurance, of unity. That is where we win. The Queen studied him closely. She remembered the garden talks, the night of the assassins, the battles where he had stood firm. He had never spoken with pride, yet his words always carried truth. The Queen made her decision. Then you will command this battle with me. Show them what humanity means. When the fleets clashed above Thalera, the stars lit with fire. The enemy came forward with endless waves of ships, their weapons shaking the skies. The Queen's forces struggled to hold the lines, their ships breaking under the weight of the attack. Daniel stood at the front of the command deck, his eyes sharp on the battle screens. He did not give orders with fear, but with calm focus. Hold here. Fall back there. Draw them closer. Make them believe we are breaking. The enemy pressed harder, certain victory was near. But then Daniel's plan unfolded. Hidden squadrons moved from the shadows, striking at the enemy's supply ships. Mines carefully placed in the void exploded, cutting off retreat. Slowly, the massive enemy fleet found itself caught in confusion. Still, the cost was great. Many of the Queen's ships fell, and soldiers died holding the line. The Queen looked at Daniel, fear touching her heart. We are losing too much. We cannot hold. Daniel turned to her, his face pale but his eyes burning with fire. We are not finished. They can break our ships, but not our will. Tell the soldiers this, we do not fight for thrones or crowns. We fight for each other, for every world that looks to us for hope. If we must fall, we will fall together, but we will not bow. His words were carried through the comms across the fleets. Soldiers who were tired and afraid felt their hearts lift. They heard not just the Queen's voice, but the voice of a man who fought beside them, a man who had bled with them. They straightened their backs, renewed their fire, and pushed forward once more. The enemy, seeing this, grew unsettled. They had believed the Queen's empire weak, especially with a human at her side. Yet here was a force that refused to break, a unity stronger than any weapon. In the final clash, Daniel himself joined the ground forces on Thalera. The enemy landed troops, hoping to capture the planet. He fought not as a distant commander but as one of the soldiers, carrying the wounded, guiding the lost, and standing at the front. His body was battered, his strength nearly gone, but he never yielded. When the enemy commander at last faced him, expecting fear, Daniel stood firm with nothing but a broken blade in his hand. You may have numbers, he said, voice steady, but you do not have heart. That is why you will lose. The Queen's forces struck with renewed courage, breaking the enemy lines. The rival empire's fleet collapsed, retreating into the void. The final battle was won, and the war ended. When silence returned, the Queen found Daniel among the weary soldiers. He was wounded, barely standing, yet his eyes still carried the same calm fire. She looked at him, her voice soft with awe. Now I understand. Your true strength is not in weapons or armies. It is in never giving up. It is in lifting others when they fall. That is what makes you powerful. Daniel gave a faint smile. I am only human. But sometimes, That is enough. The queen knew then that her choice had been right. The galaxy had doubted him, but he had proven that humanity's flame could light even the darkest of skies. The war was over. The enemy fleet had retreated into the deep void, their pride broken and their power scattered. Across the Queen's empire, people celebrated with songs and lights. Worlds that had feared the fall of their ruler now raised banners of victory. But for the Queen, the greatest victory was not only the survival of her empire. It was the man who had stood beside her through every storm. Daniel walked through the palace gardens once more. The same glowing flowers that had seemed so calm at the beginning of his journey now shone with brighter colors. Children ran through the paths, laughing in safety, their parents no longer afraid of war. Soldiers bowed as he passed, not with forced respect but with true gratitude. They whispered his name with pride, calling him the flame that refused to go out. The Queen watched him from a balcony before stepping down to join him. She wore no crown that day, only a simple robe, for she wished to meet him not as ruler but as partner. When he saw her, he smiled in his quiet way. "You should be resting," she said gently. His arms were still wrapped in bandages from the final battle. "I will rest," Daniel answered, "but first I wanted to see the garden again. It reminds me of why we fought. Not for power, but for peace." They walked together through the blossoms, the silence between them full of meaning. Finally, the Queen stopped and faced him. "When I chose you, many called it weakness," she said softly. "Even I wondered if my heart had deceived me. But you have shown me more than strength. You have shown me what it means to endure, to lead, and to care without asking for reward. You have given not only me hope, but my entire empire." Daniel looked down, humble as always. "I only did what I could. I am no hero. I am just human." She touched his hand, her voice firm. "No. You are human, yes, but that is not small. That is greatness in its own form. The galaxy has seen warriors, rulers, and conquerors, but they had not seen what humanity could be until you stood before them. You gave them courage not through fear, but through trust. That is why you are different." Word of their victory spread beyond the empire. Other species who once doubted humans now looked at Earth with new respect. Ambassadors from distant worlds came to the palace, no longer dismissing humans as weak, but seeking friendship. Slowly, humanity began to find its place among the stars, not through weapons, but through the strength Daniel had revealed. At a great gathering in the palace hall, the Queen stood beside Daniel as leaders from across the galaxy watched. She raised her voice so all could hear. "This man, Daniel of Earth, stood with me when others turned away. He fought not only with strength of body, but with strength of spirit. He showed us that true power is not in how loudly one commands, but in how deeply one stands for others. Let this be the legacy of our two worlds, that together, we are stronger than apart." The hall erupted with applause, not forced but real. Daniel bowed his head, his heart heavy with humility. He had never sought fame or glory, yet it had found him because he had chosen to stand when it mattered most. Later, when the ceremony ended and the stars shone once more above the palace, Daniel and the Queen sat quietly together on the balcony. The galaxy stretched before them, vast and full of unknown paths. "Do you ever think of Earth?" she asked softly. "Every day," he admitted. "But now, I think of this place too. Both are my home. Both are in my heart." She smiled, her eyes warm. "Then we will carry both legacies forward. Your world and mine, united." Daniel looked at her, then at the endless stars. Perhaps that is the true strength of humanity, not in standing alone, but in joining with others, and never giving up. The Queen leaned closer, her voice almost a whisper. And together, we will never give up. Above them, the stars burned bright, as if the universe itself honored the bond between a queen and a human. Their story was no longer just about survival, but about hope, a hope that would guide their people for generations to come.